Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the webinar hosted by the Seva International USA DC chapter. My name is Saidi Kurala. I'm a rising senior at Centerville High School, and I'm one of the lead coordinators for Youth for Seva, and I'll be your host for this afternoon. In these trying times, the Seva International DC chapter is working hard to serve the community. As a response to the pandemic, our chapter has served food and groceries to 13 shelters and food pantries, amounting to 3,500 hot meals and 5,000 pounds of groceries donated to those in need. We have established a community helpline for non-emergency medical advice with a team of 6 physicians. We have over 300 committed volunteers working on various COVID-19 service activities, and we have donated over 6,000 personal protective equipment, or PPE, including masks and face shields. We have provided lunch to healthcare workers in 12 hospitals, including the Ainuva hospitals, and we are working with first responders to make cloth masks for them to use. Now I would like to introduce our speaker for today, Dr. Vikram Patarkine. Dr. Vikram is a chemical environmental engineer with 3 decades of international experience covering consulting, R&D, technology development, manufacturing, and training. He has received the U.S. citizenship through recognition of extraordinary ability through sustained national or international acclaim. Dr. Vikram is presently the CEO of Peace USA, an independent consulting practice set up to provide environmental stewardship strategies and solutions to investor groups and clients around the world. Dr. Vikram was the founding CTO of a renewable energy technology startup, senior VP of an engineering consulting firm, and director of process engineering of an equipment manufacturing firm. During the 1990s, he led the environment and natural resources management consulting practice of Tata Consultancy Services, one of the world's largest consulting firms. Dr. Vikram has been nominated on several prestigious professional committees, such as the Chesapeake Bay Program Scientific and Technical Advisory Committee and the Water Environment Federation's Municipal Resource Recovery Design Committee, as an expert on nutrient management, energy conservation, and renewable energy. Dr. Vikram holds a PhD in environmental engineering from Virginia Tech and a master's in chemical engineering from Nagpur University. He has been an adjunct professor of environmental engineering at the University of Missouri and has also taught master's students at Pennsylvania State University. He has authored chapters in manuals, peer-reviewed papers, and numerous technical reports. He has conducted training programs and has made conference presentations worldwide. Dr. Vikram is a keen student of how Bhagavad Gita and Vedanta principles can be applied and experienced in our daily lives. He has been a yoga practitioner for 4 decades and regularly teaches those interested. He is a music connoisseur and has organized several classical music concerts, and he follows and actively promotes a lifestyle based on a natural plant-based diet for both personal health and the planet's sustainability. He plays table tennis regularly for physical fitness, and he loves cricket and watches it whenever he is able to. Today, he will be talking about the qualities of a volunteer from the Bhagavad Gita perspective.
Thank you, Sahiti, for that introduction, and thanks to Seva for inviting me to share my thoughts here. I will share my screen here, and you should see qualities of ideal volunteer from Bhagavad Gita perspective. I will try to speak for about half an hour, after which we can take questions. Before I start my presentations, I always like to give a disclaimer that the information I provide here is for your information and it's not intended to be a critique on your belief system. I'm presenting only my personal experience and I do not expect you to agree with me. If you don't agree with me, that's okay. You may take whatever suits you from my presentation and you may let go of whatever does not suit you. That will be just fine. This is what I'm going to talk about. What is the Gita? Why Gita? The 4 paths described in the Gita. Then what is volunteering? Because we are talking about what are the qualities of a volunteer, right? After that, some concluding remarks. Let us see how this goes. So what is Gita? What is Bhagavad Gita? In short, Gita, it is Bhagavan's song. Bhagavan's song. Bhagavan is the divine entity that has 6 different qualities like infinite opulence, infinite wisdom, as well as infinite renunciation. That is called a Bhagavan. So here, Krishna, who narrated the Gita or who told about the Gita to Arjuna, his disciple, at the battle of Mahabharata. That is the historical context. We all know the story of Mahabharata. There was a Kaurava clan who had two brothers, Dhritarashtra and Pandu. They were both Kauravas, but Pandu's sons used to be called the Pandavas. Okay, and Dhritarashtra's sons used to be called the Kauravas, although both of them were actually Kauravas. They were all descendants of the Kuru Vamsha. All right, so these Kauravas were 100 and Pandavas were 5. In a game of Dyuta, or a gambling game which was prevalent at that time, Kauravas won and they abandoned the Pandavas, or they ordered the Pandavas to go to the forest for about 12 years. And then after that, for 1 year in incognito mode, after which they came and they were supposed to get their kingdom back. But the Kauravas refused to give them any land. Okay. So the Pandavas were forced to come to battle and do a battle with the Kauravas to get their own land back. Okay. In this battle, two parties were formed, the Kauravas and the Pandavas, and then they took help from several kings in the region. The kingdom which Krishna used to run, he said that I don't want to be partial to you because I have grown up with you. You happen to be like my cousins. In fact, the Pandavas were his cousins because Krishna's father Vasudeva, and Arjuna and the Pandavas' mother Kunti, they were brother and sister. All right. And these Kauravas were the Pandavas' paternal cousins. So anyway, all of these people grew up together. So what Krishna said, I will give my army to one party and I will be by myself on the other party. So Duryodhana, the leader of the Kauravas, he wanted strength and he wanted numbers in his army. So he chose to take Krishna's army, which suited Arjuna just fine. He took Krishna himself because he wanted Krishna to be on his side and he wanted Krishna to be his guide. So Krishna told him, listen, I'm not going to fight. All I can do is to be your charioteer. So I will drive your vehicle and guide you. But you are the one who is going to do your fight. So then they come to the battlefield. At the battlefield, Arjuna has won a lot of battles in the past. He was the greatest warrior of his time, never lost a battle in the past. So he was full of himself and he was quite arrogant. So he told Krishna, who dares to fight me? Please show me. So he asked Krishna to take the chariot in the middle of the two armies to show who has lined up to fight with him. So Krishna took the chariot in the middle of the battlefield, but not in front of Duryodhana, who was the sworn enemy of Arjuna. He took the chariot in front of Dronacharya, who was the guru of Arjuna, and Bhishmacharya, who was his granduncle. So as soon as he saw those two people in front of him, then he had confusion in his mind. He was thinking, how can I kill my guru and how can I kill my granduncle? You see, all of his life, he had killed many people in all kinds of battles. So killing was not a problem for him. Okay. And whoever he might have killed in the past, they might have been somebody's guru, somebody's uncle, or whatever. So killing somebody else's uncle or somebody else's guru was not a problem either. His problem was, how can I kill my guru and my granduncle? That was the problem. On the battlefield, who was Arjuna? Was Arjuna somebody's nephew or was Arjuna somebody's disciple? No, on the battlefield, he was a warrior. So he forgot his identity as a warrior on the battlefield and he started thinking of himself as somebody else who he was not at that time. Therefore, Gita basically clears this misunderstanding, not just from Arjuna's mind, but also from the mind of each one of us. Each one of us will find ourselves into a situation where we will wonder or we will get confused. We will start wondering, who am I? What is my duty? What is my life's goal? How do I achieve it? So these are the questions Bhagavad Gita answers. In fact, all of us need to understand these very clearly in our mind so that even if we are a good volunteer, we should know who a good volunteer is. If we understand who I am, then I can be a good volunteer. So Gita is basically an art of living manual. It teaches us all kinds of things. It teaches us life's lessons at three different levels. Okay. At the first level, at the material level, at the material life level, it teaches us how we should live so that we can become prosperous materially. So Gita is not against material prosperity. It will teach us ways in which we can be materially prosperous. That's fine. In fact, we need to achieve all of those things. It will also teach us how to be happy in our mind. So that is at the Adi Daivik level. So the first one is at the objective level, at the material level. The second one is at the experience level. So how do we experience life when we come in contact with the material world? So that mental happiness that we experience, that is also addressed. And at the third level is the Adhyatmic level or the experiencer level. Who am I? That is the question answered in the Gita, which leads to inner transformation and self-realization, after which you will take up whatever you want to take up in the world in the most ideal manner. So whether you want to be an ideal volunteer or an ideal father or an ideal son or an ideal teacher, it doesn't matter. If you become an ideal human being, you will take on whatever role you need to take on and do your best, because you will end up living your life to express happiness, express inner joy rather than seek happiness. That is why Gita. In the Gita, there are 4 different paths described in great detail. So depending upon where we are in terms of our own understanding of who we are, we will choose one or more of these paths. And the one who is completely self-realized, he will exhibit all 4 paths in his life naturally. So the 4 paths that are described, number 1 is karma or karma yoga, which is the path of our duty, our service at the physical level. So we undertake an action with our physical body and we do it as best as we can in a selfless manner, in a spirit of duty. That is called karma yoga. The second path is yoga or discipline or disciplining of the mind. It also helps us to focus. All right. The Karma Yoga portion of the Gita is in the first 5 chapters, and in the 6th chapter, Yoga portion of the Gita is described in great detail. Thereafter, the Gita talks about Bhakti, which is the path of devotion or love. Okay. This is taken up in 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 chapters. And after that, the rest of the chapters talk about Jnana, especially the 13, 14, 15. And then there are 3 more chapters, 2 are appendices, and 1 is the conclusion of the entire Gita. So total 18 chapters focusing on 4 different things: karma, yoga, bhakti, and jnana. So duty, discipline, devotion, and knowledge. So these are the 4 things Gita will describe. We will focus more on karma and yoga because those are the 2 things most necessary for an ideal volunteer. So let's focus on those. So what is volunteering? So if you go to the universal information source called the Wikipedia, it will tell you that volunteering is an altruistic activity where an individual or a group freely gives time to benefit another person, group, or organization. This is exactly what Seva does, is it not? Renowned for skill development and is often intended to promote goodness or to improve human quality of life. So if we are doing these activities or if we are engaged in these activities in a selfless manner, that's when we are volunteering, right? A volunteer never asks the question, what's in it for me? If you ask, or if ever this question even touches your mind, what's in it for me, then you are no longer a volunteer. Then you are doing it as a business or a transaction. If you are a volunteer, what is in it for me will never enter your mind. All right, so a volunteer, according to the Gita's definition, is an ideal karma yogi. All right, so the Karma Yoga portion of the Gita, or the one shloka, which is, or the one verse that is often quoted as the essence of Karma Yoga, is the 47th verse in the 2nd chapter, which says, Karmanyevadhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana ma karma phala hetur bhu ma te sangostva karmani. Literally what this means is we have adhikara. over only our duty. We don't have any adhikar or control or claim over the results. The fruits of the work should not be our motive, and we should never be inactive. Now, this is one of the most misunderstood verses in the Gita. A lot of times people will misunderstand this as you should do your duty, you should do whatever you're doing, but you should not expect anything in return. You should not expect any fruit of the action. Does that mean that I go to work and I don't take salary? Of course not. It does not mean that. What this really means is the word adhikara means control rather than right. All right. The word adhikara means right, and the word adhikara also means control. If you understand this verse, understanding the word adhikara as the right, then you will not have understood this verse at all. But if you understand the word adhikara as control, what does that mean? It means that I have control over my karma or whatever I do. I have control over whatever I do, isn't it? But whatever is going to come out of it, it's going to come out of it based on natural principles and natural law. All right. That natural law is not under my control. Natural law works independently of what I do. All right. So the karma phala or the fruits of the action will happen according to natural law over which I don't have control. That's what this means. So what should I do if I undertake an activity and a certain result does not come out? Then what I should do is I should go back and figure out whether I have done something wrong. Okay. And then correct my procedure, and then the result will come. That's what we do in a chemistry lab in the high school, is it not? If you understand this verse in this manner, then you will understand the crux of karma yoga. All right. Then a volunteer has to be a role model also. All right. The 21st verse in the 3rd chapter says, Yad yad acharati shreshtha tattad deve taro janaha sa yad pramanam kurute lokas tadanu vartate. Which means whatever action a great man performs, common men will follow that. Then whatever standards this great man sets by his exemplary acts, the entire world will pursue that. This is what an ideal volunteer is. So an ideal volunteer, through his exemplary behavior, will encourage others to be good volunteers, and at the same time he will do volunteering without any expectation in return. That's what the ideal volunteer is. So he will inspire others as well. How can we do this? You see, we cannot really help anybody else unless we ourselves are secure and grounded first. So when we fly in the aeroplane, don't they declare in the beginning, they announce in the beginning that if there is a decrease in the cabin pressure, then the oxygen mask will come down automatically. But you have to put on your own mask first and then help somebody else, which means what? You secure yourself first, and then only you can help other people, right? So if you are a volunteer, you need to make sure that you are self-disciplined yourself. Only then you can help somebody else, right? If you are messed up, how can you help somebody else? How do you become self-disciplined? There are 8 different paths or 8 different steps on the path of yoga. This is all described in the 6th chapter of the Gita. The 8 steps of yoga are yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, samadhi. So when people talk about yoga, most people think of yoga meaning twisting our body into impossible shapes, and then if you cannot come out, then you have to call the doctor. No, that's not what yoga means. Yoga means all these 8 steps. All right, the asana or the postures of yoga is only a small portion of yoga. We are also here, we are going to focus mostly on yama and niyama because these are the things necessary for a volunteer to become a good volunteer. All right, so the first one is yama or restraints. What are the restraints? What are the things I should not do? When I do not do these things, then I'm not a problem for the world, and the world is not a problem for me. So these are the 5 yamas or restraints that we all have to follow. Number 1 is non-violence. So I should not indulge in violence through my body, through my speech, or even in my mind. That is called ahimsa, right? The second restraint is not lying, which means be always honest and truthful. The third one is not stealing. So whatever we have or whatever we take is after we have worked towards it through honest means. Only then it becomes what Gita says as asteya, okay, or the yoga system says asteya. The fourth thing is no indulgence or brahmacharya. Now again, this word is also grossly misunderstood by most people. Most people translate brahmacharya into celibacy. No, that's not the thing. Brahmacharya literally means somebody who is progressing or walking in the direction of Brahman. Brahman means expansion or infinity. So someone who is trying to realize his own self will, because he is pursuing a higher path or a higher goal, all of his lower goals will automatically get dropped. That is brahmacharya. The fifth restraint is no hoarding, aparigraha, not hoarding things and keeping things for yourself, not gathering things more than our absolute need. That is what aparigraha means. So these are the restraints we have to follow. The 5 observances or the niyamas are: 1, cleanliness. We have to be clean from not just outside bodily cleanliness, but also inside. Our mind also has to be pure. Purity of mind is achieved by doing karma yoga or doing selfless service. So volunteering will help you clear the cobwebs in your mind. That's why volunteering is important. All right. The second observance is contentment, which is santosha, which means I'm content with whatever I have. We should always be content with our material situation in life. Whatever we get at the end of the day, after we have put in honest hard work, whatever we get in return, we should be content with it, because that has come according to natural laws, and not because if we want more than that, of course, we should put in more effort. We can do that always. All right. But whatever we have, we should be content with it. Santosha. The third observance is discipline and austerities, that is called the tapa. Tapa means doing all of these things with great discipline and austerities, or doing the austerities with great discipline. That is what tapa means. All right. And the fourth thing is study of the self, which means swadhyaya, which is what we are doing right now. We are trying to learn of the higher principles in life. That is called swadhyaya. The fifth thing is alignment with natural law, which is called Ishvara Pranidhana. That is what we need to observe in our life. All right. Then what will happen once we observe all of these things? After that, of course, we should do asana, pranayama, all of those things. We are not going to go into those details, but we achieve equanimity or balance in our mind, which is described in the 17th verse in the 6th chapter of the Gita. It says, Yuktahara viharasya, yukta cheshtasya karmasu, yukta swapnava bodhasya yogo bhavati dukkhaha. Which means he who is regulated in his habits of eating, sleeping, recreation, and work can mitigate all material pains by practicing the yoga system. That is what this verse can be translated as in English, which is pretty obvious. So we have to be regulated in our eating habits, sleeping habits. We should eat only when we are hungry and not overeat. We should not oversleep. We should engage in recreation, but not get too carried away with recreation and make that into a full-time occupation, because we have to also work. All of those things have to be in balance. That is what equanimity is. So in our daily lives, what can I do and what should I not do? So first, we should learn what we should not do. So the don'ts are more important than the do's. So when you're trying to drive a car or learning how to drive a car, it is more important for you to know where the brake is. And then you will do whatever you can do in a better manner. All right. So the don'ts that I always encourage people to follow: do not eat unless you are hungry. Do not drink unless you are thirsty. See, nature gives us those urges. Why do we eat these days? Most of the people eat because food is available. That's not a good reason to eat. The only reason to eat, the only condition, sufficient and necessary condition for eating is I'm hungry. Otherwise, don't eat. Similarly, don't drink unless you're thirsty. Then don't eat past the first burp, which is half stomach food. Once your stomach is half filled with food, then you will have a small burp. You should stop at that time, because the rest of the space in the stomach has to be left open for digestive juices that get secreted into our stomach and air. Only then the food will be mixed properly and digested properly. We should not eat snacks between meals, because we want to make sure that the food is digested first before you eat anything else. We should avoid nervous stimulants like drugs and tobacco and cigarettes and things like that, alcohol. All of these things we should avoid. Nervous stimulants, intoxicants, refined food, and foods that lead to lethargy. All of these things have to be avoided. Then we should also do these things. All of these 4 or 5 things I have said, maybe 8 things are there. We have to follow a 7 days a week routine of work, exercise, meal times, recreation, and rest. Just like we saw in the Yuktahara Viharasya shloka. We should eat between sunrise and sunset. That is when our digestive fire is at its best and we digest the food we eat properly. We should fast overnight for at least 14 hours. See, if we eat only between sunrise and sunset, we will easily be able to do a 14 plus hour fast every day. We should eat as much natural food as possible, what is grown locally and what is grown seasonally. We should eat very simple food. If we are going to cook our food, we should cook simple food from scratch, like local grains and beans for protein. We start from scratch and we consume the food as soon as it is cooked, within an hour of cooking. That's the best way to eat. We should also exercise regularly. We should do stretches. I'm going to show you some pictures of the Surya Namaskara I do, which is a very powerful exercise for the entire body, especially the spine. And then we should take up a sport or a hobby of our choice for recreation, right? So for fitness, this is what I do. I'm sure a lot of you do this also. The Surya Namaskara routine has about 10 steps, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And in the 6th step, this is called the Sashtanga Namaskar, which means 8 of our angas are touching the ground. Then we come up as a push-up in Bhujangasana here, and this is the dog pose, Svanasana. We pull our leg up, exactly opposite of what we did here. Then bend down. This is called Hastapadasana, which is the same thing as we did here. And then we come back to the first pose like we were here. So that's the Surya Namaskara routine I do every day. I try to do for about half an hour. I end up doing about 40 to 50 of those every day. And after that, I feel great. I feel wonderful. I also do a lot of yogasanas. You might have seen some photographs in the previous slides. I also teach yoga to people who want to learn seriously. Therefore, in conclusion, I can say that Gita is a timeless text which is relevant today as it has always been. Okay, so it was as relevant at Arjuna's time as it is today. It teaches us about selfless service. It also helps us realize our essential nature, which is oneness with everything. You see, we erroneously think of ourselves as apart or disconnected from others or everything else. That is not the truth. We are intricately linked with everything in this universe. Okay? When we understand this, then we can become an ideal volunteer. This is what I wanted to present. So thank you very much for listening to me so patiently. I don't know how long it has taken, but probably about half an hour, and I'll be happy to take questions hereafter. I'll stop sharing my screen so that you can share my video if you wish and ask me questions as they might have come up.
Yes, Vikramji, we have one question. Could you please also elaborate on how to use Gita teachings in daily life?
Correct. So the ideal qualities of the volunteer, I've told you, are the ideal qualities of any person. In fact, when we understand who we are, when we understand our nature as not apart from others, then what will I do? See, as long as I consider you, Sahiti or Pallavi, as apart from me or as totally unrelated to me, then I will not care about you. I will do all kinds of things, or I could do all kinds of things to you because I have excluded you from the definition of I. Everything that we include in the definition of I, those things we will always be in love with. Those things we will care for. But anything and everything we consider as not within that definition of I, those things we will not care about. So to bring the Gita in daily life, we have to understand our true nature as one with everything and everybody, right? Once we understand that, then we will automatically start doing all of our work from the point of view of selfless service. Whatever I do, is that beneficial for the society? Is that beneficial for my family? Is that beneficial for nature? Because whatever I am is because of my family, because of the society, because of nature. All kinds of natural forces are helping me achieve what I am achieving, is it not? See, even when I'm breathing, who is actually breathing? We think that we are breathing. No, nature is breathing on our behalf or for us. If you don't believe me, do this experiment. Shut your nose down and shut your mouth down and stop breathing. So nature will force you to breathe. You will have to take your hand off your nose and you will start breathing. Nature will force you to breathe. See, nature is the one that is taking the breath. Okay? We think that we are breathing. We are not breathing. Nature is doing that. So we have to be grateful for all of these natural forces that sustain us. And our life should be lived in reverence of all these natural forces. That reverence itself is called bhakti. The selfless service I do is called karma yoga. That is what a seva volunteer would do, right? And I will do all of this with great focus. That is yoga. And I will do with an awareness of who I am, which is the jnana portion of Gita. So all four things can be integrated in our daily life all the time. That is what Gita is all about. So Gita is not a book you will wrap in a very nice wrapping and keep it in your altar or in your puja room and do puja every day, but not read it at all. No, you should read it, you should contemplate on it, and you should live according to the principles of Gita. That's when you will truly understand the importance of Gita and you will live a fulfilled life. At the end of the 15th chapter, Bhagavan says, Etad buddhva buddhiman syat krutakrutyaśya bharata. I have taught you this entire knowledge, at the end of which, if you understand this, then you will get a feeling of fulfillment. That is what the Gita promises. The promise of the Gita, the promise of Vedanta is to understand our own universal nature, Aham Brahmasmi, our own divine nature. Okay, all of us are essentially divine, but we have misunderstood ourselves as something other than that. So this misunderstanding in Gita's words is called moha. Moha means I have understood myself or I have imagined myself to be who I am not. So the example given or the historical context was Arjuna was placed in a situation where he indicated his confusion to the Lord. He said that, how can I fight my own guru and fight my own granduncle? No, at the time of war, he was a warrior. So whatever we do at whatever time. So the one thing we have to all remember, if we want to get Gita down into our everyday life, how can we do that? Remember one mantra. Wherever I am, whatever I am, whenever I am, I shall be 100%. So whenever I am, wherever I am, whatever I am, I shall be 100%. So right now I am a speaker. So I should be 100% a speaker. Right now you are a listener. So you should be 100% a listener. Whether you are or not, I don't know. I hope you are. So hopefully whatever I have told you, if you have listened to this with awareness, with focus, with concentration, you would have understood some of these principles. If you would like to understand these principles further, or if you would like to talk further, you are most welcome to connect with me. I've given you my LinkedIn link and you can connect with Seva and they can also help you get in touch with me. So I hope this answers the question they have asked. Any other question you have, Sahiti or Pallavi, or anything you have seen on Facebook?
Yeah, there's one more question. Could you explain how following sattvic food can help with the spiritual upliftment of one's life?
Yes, indeed. In fact, we could do an entire webinar on this topic because see what happens when we eat sattvic food. Sattvic food is what leads us to balance, equanimity. It does not lead to activity or excitement. All right. So that's why remember in those don'ts, I had told you, you should avoid intoxicants, you should avoid things that will excite us. Those things have to be avoided. So sattvic food basically consists of fruits, vegetables, and there are certain vegetables we should not be eating. You know, that's a separate topic we can take up another time. But certain vegetables that are triggers of excitement in our body, those we should not eat. We should eat sprouted grains or sprouted beans, and we should also eat, you know, plant-based food. If you want to cook the food, that's fine. I prefer not to cook my food. I prefer to eat only fruits and nuts. That's what I eat mostly. But sattvic food is basically this: plant-based, freshly cooked, if you want to eat cooked food, or otherwise unprocessed food, whatever nature has provided us in its infinite bounty and blessing. We should do that. All right. So these are the things we should think of. If we eat this sattvic food, then our body is detoxified, number one. Our mind is detoxified, number two. Because of that, we clearly understand and we clearly see the world as it is. All right. So that is what ends up happening. And once we do that, then we understand what our duty is, what our purpose of life is. All of those things become clear to us. So that is why sattvic food is very important in all of this. So that's why I gave you this list of do's and don'ts, right? So if you want, you just take a picture of it and post it on your refrigerator. Remember all of that. What should I not do and what should I do every day? These are all daily things we should be doing, isn't it? Great. Any other questions?
There are no questions. There are no more questions. But thank you so much, Dr. Vikram.
That is wonderful. It's been a pleasure talking to you and talking to the group that's gathered here. If there are any further questions, I'll be happy to answer them separately if you want. Appreciate your inviting me here. Have a wonderful afternoon, all of you.